Hey, it's Jeff with YourLearningCareer.com. Today I'm going to take you on a behind the scenes look at what a corporate instructional designer does. I'm actually here in my home office. You can see this is where I work every day. I thought it would be interesting to show you kind of what an instructional designer actually does. So let's jump into it. The first thing I want to do is give you just a little bit of context around my job. Now, I'm not going to go into specifics about the company that I work for. I generally try to keep my day job separate from my YouTube stuff, but I did want to give you at least some information. So to begin with, I am a senior instructional designer. I've been in my current role for 5 years. My company is very large. I'd say it's probably like a Fortune 5 company. And then the department I work in is also very large. My department is made up of a lot of different specialties. So we actually have a group of trainers, we have a group of project managers, and then we have my team, which is made up of instructional designers, which I have to tell you is very cool and very different from what I've ever done before. Just about every other job I had prior to this one, I did everything. I was the trainer, I was the instructional designer, I was the e-learning developer, the LMS administrator. I basically, I did everything. So this idea of being able to focus on instructional design only, that was very new to me. Very new, very exciting. So when I was looking for jobs, that's what I honed in on. I said, I really just want to do instructional design. And the other thing was I wanted to work from home. That was a big thing. And I do. So I mentioned that at the beginning. I'm in my home office. So I do work from home. As a matter of fact, our entire training team is remote. And that is not due to the pandemic. We were remote way before that. So that's pretty cool. And even the trainers. So we do a lot of online training. We do a lot of webinars and things like that. And so it's not a problem. Our trainers can work from home most of the time. Now, there are times when we have in-person classes, and for those, they will fly into, wherever the training is being held. All right, so now let's jump into what a typical day looks like. So the first thing I will do is I always like to go into my Outlook calendar to see what my meeting schedule is looking like for the day. Now, some days I will have meeting after meeting after meeting. Other days are pretty quiet and I don't have a lot of meetings and I can really hunker down and get some work done. So it just depends. And usually a lot of the meetings they range, but a lot of them are with my project team. So the way it works on my team is we are usually, as an instructional designer, I'm usually going to be assigned to a team, and the team's going to consist of myself, the instructional designer, one of our trainers, as well as a project manager, depending on the type of project. So that's typically how it goes. And the other thing I should tell you is we always have pretty much multiple projects. So I don't just have one project that I'm working on. At any given time, I could have 2, 3, 4, I usually have multiple projects at various phases going on. So on one of the days this week, the way it looked was this. I actually had a meeting early in the morning, fairly early in the morning. The meeting that I went to was a project team meeting, and this was a brainstorm for a project where we had already conducted the analysis. We had conducted several interviews, and we'd kind of compiled all of that information, and we were at a point where we were ready to make a recommendation. And so that's what that meeting was about. And one of the things we like to do whenever we are coming up with our solutions, we like to come up with several different options and then really kind of weigh out the pros and the cons and what's going to be best for our audience. So we had our discussion in the meeting and we were able to come up with a solution for this particular project. Now in this project, The request that came in was around these couple of products, like 2 or 3 products, where there was a little bit of confusion with our salespeople. So our solution is going to address the confusion that they are having with these products. In this case, we're going to hold a webinar. We found in our interviews when we talk to them, one of the things we like to ask people is, how would you like training to be delivered? And we heard from many of the folks we interviewed that they really liked the webinar format. They wanted, on this particular topic, they really wanted the opportunity to ask questions. So we decided on a webinar, and then we're going to create a couple of job aids that they can refer to afterward. What we typically do from there is to create a project scope, and that is actually something that I am responsible for as the instructional designer. And that's what I did next, because I knew we wanted to get this project moving, and I needed to work on the scope. And here, let me show you what that looks like. Now, I'm not going to show you the actual document. Again, like I said, I don't want to get in trouble, right? But let me just show you the kind of information that we would include in a scope. So when I sit down after we have the brainstorm and we decide the solution, now I'm going to formalize it with this scope document. And you'll see that some of the things we're going to talk about are what is the business need? What's the background of this project? What are the behaviors that we want the learners to demonstrate as a result of whatever we create? So we include things like that. We try to, we also include in the scope kind of an audience mindset. Well, first of all, we include who is the audience, but then we also put in things like, what is that audience thinking? And what did we hear from the audience when we were talking to them? So those are some things. And then the big main part of the scope is going to be where I lay out what our solution is and what it looks like. So I'll put down, we're going to propose a webinar, and if it's multiple sessions, I'll put that. I'll put the length of time, and then I'll list out all of the deliverables that we plan to create. So that could be the webinar, the PowerPoint, it might be the job aids that I mentioned, and I'll put all that in the scope as well. And then the other thing that I'll put is a timeline. When will the webinar actually take place? And then also, what are all the things I have to do, or we, the team, what does the team have to do leading up to when the webinar happens? There's a lot that goes into this project scope, and it becomes a very valuable document because, number one, it helps us as a project team to stay on track, to stay focused, but it also helps us with our customer. So whoever requested the training, we will usually have a meeting with them where we go over the things that we have in the scope and we get their buy-in, right? We get their agreement. So that way, in the future, if something comes up and they're like, oh, can you do this? Can you do that? We can always point back to the scope and say, well, this is what we agreed to and this is our timeline, that kind of thing. And usually, most of the people we've worked with before, and they kind of know our process. So there's usually not any big problems, but that scope document is very valuable. So in my day in the life, that is what I did. I worked on the scope. That can take, it can take an hour, it can take 2 hours, just depends. So once I got the scope done, I wanted to shift gears and work on this other project. So that project, like I mentioned, that was one where we were dealing with some product differences and helping some sales folks get rid of some confusion. And then this other project I've been working on is a systems project. So there are some computer systems that some of our customer service reps have to use to enter information. And what we found out during our analysis is that a lot of the information, well, I shouldn't say a lot, but there's information that is getting put into the system incorrectly. And it's causing errors. The incorrect information is causing errors down the line, which can have various impacts. So we found this out during the analysis. We talked to people to find out why, why these errors were happening, and we got some really good information. So that project, the scope is already done, so I'm ready to start getting into the development of the learning solution. So what does it look like when you actually start jumping into the development? Well, like many of you, what I really want to do is get into whatever software. Like I really love to, get into different software, whether it's PowerPoint or Camtasia to do video editing or one of the e-learning authoring softwares. I like to create. That's the fun part for me. But here's the thing. Before you can really start creating, there's still some other stuff you have to do. So in this case, there were a couple things I wanted to start getting the ball rolling on. Number one, this is another one where we are creating a webinar. And the purpose of this webinar is to make the customer service reps aware of the impacts of these errors. And it's not to point fingers. It's not to say, you're making all these mistakes and you better shape up. It's really just to educate them on why do people care? Why does it matter if you enter something in like this? So it's just to help them understand. So we're creating an awareness webinar. But then the other thing is, what we found out in our analysis is that there are a lot of resources available about these systems. And a lot of these resources do tell them the right way to enter the information. But the problem is the resources aren't always in the most obvious place, and the way they're organized isn't always the easiest for the reps to figure out what they need. We're going to create a resource that we can put in one easy location that will take them to whatever task they're trying to do. So for the webinar, before I can jump in and start creating fun slides and all this stuff, I really need to take a step back and create an outline. I usually use the scope as a jumping off point because a lot of the stuff I put in there, I put the business goal in there, I've put the behaviors in there, but now I need to take those behaviors and think about, okay, what are we going to do in the training that's going to help them learn these behaviors? And if this sounds like action mapping, it is. If you don't know what action mapping is, be sure to check out this video. I'll link to it here where I talk about different instructional design processes. But yeah, in action mapping, you start with the business goal, you then go to behaviors, and then you think about, okay, what kind of activities am I going to build into the class to support the behaviors? So that's what I'm going to start doing with this webinar, is I need to start defining the activities. And then once I get those figured out, then I will look at, okay, and then what kind of supporting information do I need for those activities? So I will start to put together an action map. I'm also going to, start putting together an outline. That can take a couple hours. That can take a little while to sit down and figure all that out. So that's something I worked on. And then the other piece that I wanted to start thinking about with that project is the resource, the centralized resource. A lot of what I try to do as an instructional designer is to not reinvent the wheel. I know that we've created lots of systems training. And what I like to do is go out to where our training lives. We have kind of a centralized place where we put our training materials. And I like to go out there and I like to look for reference structures. So that's what I did for that. I went out, I really started researching some existing material and found a reference structure that I feel pretty good about, that I feel like this is something I can use for this resource. And by the time I had done that, it was the end of the day. For me, typically, I usually end the day around 4:30, sometimes 5, but I really don't have crazy hours. I usually start working. I usually jump on and start looking at email around 7:30 in the morning, maybe 8. And then I usually finish up around 4:30 or 5. Continuing from here, there's still lots and lots to do on these projects. So of course, there's going to be a lot of collaboration with my project team. We're going to look at the outline. We'll talk through a lot of these activities and things together. And then of course, I will be scheduling meetings with subject matter experts to gather more information. And then eventually, of course, I will be building these things, the resources, the PowerPoints, all of that good stuff. So there's lots more to do, lots more to look forward to. And that's what's so fun about this job. Really, every day is different. There's always something different going on. If you found this helpful, I'd appreciate a like. I'd also love to hear from you in the comments if you have any questions. As always, I thank you for watching, and we will see you next time.